The city was silent, broken, and filled with shadows. Tall towers that once touched the sky now stood like skeletons, their windows shattered. Their lights forever gone, streets that once carried voices, laughter and music were now empty, filled only with the sound of wind pushing, dust and ash. Among those ruins walked a small alien girl, her steps slow, her legs weak, her hands trembling as she held her thin body. She was starving, her eyes large and hollow, her lips dry, her stomach twisting with pain every time she tried to breathe. She had nothing left, no family, no friends, no home, no food. The world had taken everything from her, and now it seemed ready to take her life too. Once her people had lived with pride. They had homes, schools, gardens, and families. But war had come. Fire had fallen from the sky, and soldiers from many worlds had walked these streets. Now, nothing was left but broken walls and broken hearts. The girl crouched near an old fountain, her body shaking as she tried to find even a drop of water. The fountain was dry, the stone cracked, the once beautiful carvings blackened by fire. She pressed her lips to the cold stone, hoping for even one drop of life, but there was none. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she thought she would let herself fall asleep there, never to wake again. But hunger was cruel, and it forced her to rise. Her body begged for food, and so she searched again, crawling through the ruins of shops and houses. She found broken glass, burnt cloth, twisted metal, but nothing she could eat. Once she had tried to chew old leather straps, but they made her sick, and her body had grown weaker. Her little hands trembled as she pushed away the rubble, hoping, praying, but always finding nothing, children-like. Her had once played here, their laughter echoing through the streets. Now she was the only child left, and her laughter was long forgotten. Her stomach growled so loudly that it frightened her. Echoing in the silent city like a monster's roar, she hugged herself, whispering softly that she would not cry, because crying took energy, and she had no energy left to give. At night, she slept in the cold shells of houses, her body curled tightly, her skin pale and fragile. When she dreamed of food, of bread soft and warm, of sweet fruits dripping with juice, of her mother's cooking. But every time she woke, there was only dust in her mouth and nothing in her hands. Each morning she told herself she could not last another day. But somehow she always woke again, weaker than before, on this night. As the moonlight touched the broken streets, she sat under the ruins of a stone wall, her body too weak to move, her eyes half closed, her hands shaking as if even holding them in her lap was too heavy. The stars above her were cold and distant, shining over a world that no longer cared for her. She wondered if anyone out there could even see her, if her small body meant anything in this wide, endless universe. Her ears caught a sound then. Faint but real footsteps, heavy and slow, scraping across broken stone. Her heart raced, fear filling her chest, because footsteps in this city never meant safety. Raiders sometimes came, cruel and loud, stealing whatever little remained, laughing. As they pushed the weak aside, she pressed herself against the wall, her eyes wide, her body frozen, praying she would not be seen. The sound grew louder, closer, steady, but tired. Her breath caught, and slowly she dared to peek from behind the broken stones. What she saw made her eyes widen even more. It was not a raider, not one of her people, not a familiar shape. It was something different, something strange, something she had only heard whispered in stories. A human. He walked slowly, his shoulders heavy, his clothes torn, his face pale with exhaustion. On his back was a small pack, worn and thin, and in his hand he carried nothing but a broken piece of wood to help him walk. His boots crushed the dust beneath him, his breath sharp and ragged. But still he moved, one step after another. The girl stared, unsure if this was danger or hope, because humans were known to fight, to destroy, but also to protect. She had nothing left to lose, yet fear still gripped her heart. If he saw her, would he chase her away? Like the others had, if he saw her, would he laugh at her weakness, or would he simply pass by, leaving her in the shadows to die? The girl pressed her small body deeper into the corner, her eyes never leaving the tired figure of the human. She was starving, she was trembling, and for the first time in many nights, she felt something other than hunger or pain. She felt suspense, a question burning inside her. Was this stranger the end of her life, or the beginning of something she could not yet imagine? The human moved slowly through the ruined street, his boots dragging against broken stone, his body heavy with exhaustion. Every step looked painful, his shoulders bent under a weight much larger than the small pack he carried. The alien girl's hollow eyes followed him, her breath caught in her throat, her small body pressed into the shadows. She had not seen a human this close before, and in her heart there was both fear and a strange, flickering hope. The soldier, for that was what he seemed to be, stopped near the wall, his hand clutching the strap of his pack. His lips were cracked, his face pale, his eyes sharp but tired. He looked like someone who had traveled too far, fought too many battles, and carried too many ghosts. Slowly, he sat down on a piece of broken stone, setting his pack on his lap, breathing heavily, as if even sitting was a battle won. The girl's eyes locked on the pack, her stomach growled painfully, and in that moment she knew what must be inside. Food, not much, maybe only one piece, but enough to mean life or death. Her hands trembled as she imagined the taste of bread, the feel of food against her tongue, the relief of her empty stomach. Her heart raced, but at the same time, guilt filled her chest, because if he had food, surely it was his last. The soldier opened the pack slowly, his rough hands careful as though the bag held treasure. Inside was not gold, not weapons, not technology, but a single wrapped meal, simple and plain. He stared at it for a long time, his jaw tight, his eyes tired. He was hungry too. The girl could see it in the way his shoulders shook, in the way his lips moved, as if whispering to himself. This was his last meal, his only chance to stay alive through the night. The girl pressed her body harder into the wall, torn between desire and fear. Should she run forward and beg? Should she hide and let him eat? Should she try to steal it if he slept? Her stomach cried out again, loud and cruel, echoing in the silence. The soldier froze, his head lifting, his sharp eyes turning toward the sound. The girl's breath stopped. Her heart thundered in her chest. She wanted to disappear into the shadows, but it was too late. The human's gaze searched the ruins until it fell upon her small figure crouched in the dark. He did not speak at first, he only looked, his face unreadable, his body still. The girl shook with fear, expecting him to shout, to chase her away, maybe even strike her. That was what others had done. That was all she had known, but he did not move, and for a long moment, only silence lay between them. Finally, the soldier reached into the pack, his hand closing on the meal. The girl's breath quickened, her eyes wide, every part of her body trembling. Would he eat it in front of her? Would he guard it and keep it close? Would he pretend she did not exist? Instead, he broke the meal in half with his hands, slow and steady. One half he kept in his palm, the other half he held out in front of him. Not walking closer, not speaking, just waiting. The girl blinked, her mind unable to understand. No one had ever shared with her. No one had ever looked at her as though she was worth saving. Her thin legs refused to move. Her small hands dug into the dirt, and her hollow eyes filled with tears she had no strength to wipe away. The human waited, his arm outstretched, the food in his hand, the silence heavy around them. Finally, with a small gasp, The girl pushed herself forward, crawling slowly. Fear and need fighting inside her chest. Each movement felt endless, her body weak, her heart racing. She stopped just a step away, staring at the food, at the human, at the strange look in his eyes. There was no cruelty there, no laughter, no greed. Only something she had almost forgotten existed. Kindness. Her hand shook as she reached forward, expecting at any moment he would pull the food away, but he did not. He let her take it. His face calm, though his own body trembled with hunger. The piece of bread was small, yet to her it looked like a feast. Her lips touched it, her teeth broke it, and the taste filled her mouth with warmth she thought she would never feel again. Tears ran down her face as she ate, each bite both joy and pain, because she knew he had given her what he needed for himself. She looked at him through blurry eyes, unable to speak, unable to ask why. The human only leaned back against the wall, chewing on the smaller piece he had kept for himself. Silent, steady, watching her eat. The night grew colder, the wind stronger. Yet for the first time in many moons, the girl's stomach no longer screamed in pain. She curled the last crumbs in her hand, as if saving them for tomorrow, though she knew she would not. The soldier closed his pack, now empty. His eyes distant as if he was thinking of battles behind him or battles yet to come. And the girl, with tears still on her face, whispered softly, though he could not hear, "Why would a stranger give his last meal to me?" The alien girl held the last crumbs in her hand. Her fingers curled tightly as if they were treasure. Her lips still carried the taste of bread. Her empty stomach finally calm after so many days of pain. She looked at the human in silence, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. He had given away half of his only meal, and now he leaned against the broken wall, his eyes half closed. His body trembling with quiet exhaustion, the ruins around them groaned in the cold night wind. Shadows stretched across shattered stone. And the silence felt heavy. The girl wanted to ask him why he would do such a thing, but her throat was too dry, her voice too weak. Instead, she stared, studying him in the faint moonlight. His face was lined with dirt and scars, his lips cracked, his eyes carrying weight she could not understand. This was no ordinary wanderer. He was someone who had seen too much, someone who had chosen mercy even when he had nothing left to give. The human opened his eyes slowly, as if he had felt her gaze upon him. He did not speak, but his look was steady, calm, almost protective, for a moment. The girl felt something she had not felt since the war began. Safe. It was a fragile feeling, as delicate as a candle flame in the wind, but it was there. Her small hands trembled as she pulled the crumbs to her chest. As if holding on to that kindness before it could be taken away, the human shifted, his body heavy, his hand brushing the ground as though ready to push himself to his feet. The girl flinched back, fear rushing into her veins. Would he now demand payment for the food? Would he chase her away? Would he reveal that this kindness was only a trick? Her body shook, her mind screamed to run, but her legs would not move. The human paused, then did something she did not expect. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flask, placing it on the ground between them before leaning back again. The girl's eyes widened. Water, her lips parted, her throat dry. She wanted to grab it, but suspicion held her still. Was this another test? Another trap? The human said nothing. He only looked away, giving her the choice. Slowly, carefully, she crawled forward, her small hands reaching for the flask. When she touched it, the cool metal felt like life itself. She opened it, drank, and the water slid down her throat like a miracle. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief. When she looked back at him, she saw no anger in his face, no greed, only quiet tiredness. He had shared his food, his water, and in return, taken nothing from her. Why? She wondered again, why would he do this when he had nothing to spare? The human leaned his head back against the wall, his eyes drifting to the sky. The stars shining faintly above them. The girl, still trembling, whispered for the first time. Her voice small and broken. Why? Why did you give it to me? The human turned his head. Meeting her eyes, for a moment, he did not answer, the silence stretching long between them. Then his voice, rough and low, came like a whisper carried by the wind, because no one should. Starve alone. The words struck her like lightning. Simple yet powerful. Her heart pounded. Her breath quickened. She had never heard such words. Not since the world had turned to ash. Her chest ached, because in that moment, she knew his choice. Was not Smollett, was everything. The girl lowered her gaze, clutching the flask in her hands. No one had looked at her as a person in so long. No one had cared whether she lived or died. And here, a stranger, an enemy even, had given her life again. She wanted to speak, to tell. Him she was grateful, to promise she would remember this forever. But all she could do was nod, her eyes filled with tears that slid silently down her dirt-streaked cheeks. The soldier watched her for a moment longer, then leaned forward. His hands clasped together as though gathering strength. He looked weak, almost broken, yet in his eyes burned something stronger than hunger. Determination. It was not only food. He had given her, it was a chance, a piece of his will to keep going. The girl realized then that his choice had changed her fate. She had been ready to give up, to let the cold take her. But now a spark of life burned inside her chest. A spark given by a man who owed her nothing, yet gave her everything. The night grew deeper, the shadows thicker, the ruins silent except for the soft breathing of two souls who should have never crossed paths. One was a child of a broken world, starving and forgotten. The other was a soldier far from home, weary and alone, together through one shared meal. Their destinies had been tied. The girl did not know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew this she would not be alone anymore. She clutched the flask tightly, her small voice whispering words too soft for him to hear. Thank you. And in the silence of the ruined city, under the cold stars, the human closed his eyes. His final piece of food gone, but something far greater born in its place. Hope. The ruins were quiet again. But it was not the same silence as before, earlier. The silence had been heavy with death and loneliness. But now it carried something new, a fragile thread of trust, as thin as a breath, as weak as a candle in the wind, yet alive. The alien girl sat with the flask in her hands, her eyes flicking toward the human again and again. He leaned against the wall, his body heavy, his chest rising and falling slowly, his face unreadable in the dim light. She wondered if he would leave her when morning came, if he would walk away without looking back. The thought made her stomach twist, and it was not hunger this time, but fear. For the first time in many nights, she felt she was not invisible. She felt seen. Her fingers clutched the flask tighter, afraid that if she let go, everything would vanish. She wanted to ask him to stay, but her lips would not form the words. The human shifted, his tired eyes moving toward her. The girl froze, her heart leaping, but his gaze was not harsh, not cold, only steady. Are you alone? He asked quietly, his voice rough from thirst. The girl nodded, her small head bowing as her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to say more, to tell him about her family, about how the war had taken them. But her throat closed with grief. The soldier gave a slow nod, as if he already understood. He looked away, his eyes drifting across the broken street. The fallen buildings, the blackened sky. There was no surprise in his face, no shock. Only the tired acceptance of someone who had seen too many broken lives. The girl watched him carefully, her fear fading a little. She whispered, barely loud enough for him to hear. Why help me? I am not like you. The human turned back to her, his lips pressed into a thin line. For a long moment, he did not speak. Then, finally, his words came soft and steady. Because kindness is not about being the same. It is about being alive. The words hung in the air. Simple, heavy, impossible to forget. The girl's chest ached, and her eyes burned. Because no one had spoken to her like that since her world had ended, the night deepened, the wind colder. But between them, the silence grew softer. The girl shifted closer without realizing, her small body trembling less as she sat near the warmth of his presence. She no longer felt like prey in the shadows. She felt like she had someone standing between her and the darkness. The soldier noticed, but he did not move away. He let her sit close, for him too. The closeness felt strange, but in a way, it eased the weight he carried, still. Danger lurked in every corner of the ruined city. Both of them knew it. Both of them listened to the night with cautious ears. Raiders prowled these streets. Hunters searching for scraps, ready to strike at the weak. The human kept his hand near the broken piece of wood he carried. His body tense, though exhausted, the girl leaned against the wall, fighting sleep, her mind torn between fear and the fragile comfort she had found, her eyes closed for only a moment. But in that moment, she dreamed of a time before the war, a time when her mother's hands placed warm bread into hers, when laughter filled her home, when she never feared the night. The dream hurt, because waking meant returning to hunger and ruins. But when her eyes opened again, she saw the human still there, watching the shadows, his eyes alert despite his weakness. And for the first time since losing everything, she did not wake in terror. She woke with a strange sense of safety. The soldier's body shook with fatigue. Yet he stayed awake, guarding her as though it was his duty. He had nothing to gain. But something deep in him refused to let her fall to the same fate as so many others. Perhaps it was because she reminded him of someone. Perhaps it was because he was tired of death. Or perhaps it was because in her eyes he saw something he thought was lost forever. Innocence. Something worth protecting, even in a world that had already burned. The girl noticed his shaking hands, his pale face, his lips pressed tight against hunger. She realized then that he had given away more than food. He had given away his strength. Her chest tightened with guilt, with gratitude, with something she could not name. She whispered softly, "You are hungry too." The soldier gave the smallest smile, one corner of his lips curving, and shook his head slowly. "Don't worry about me," he said, though his voice was weak. The girl lowered her gaze, her small hands curling around the empty flask. Trust, fragile and new, began to bloom inside her chest. She had been taught that humans were dangerous, that they only took, that they destroyed. But this one had given. And in giving, he had changed everything. She wanted to believe him. To believe that not all humans were the same. Her tired eyes closed again, her body leaning against the wall. But this time she whispered before sleep, "I will not leave you." The soldier heard the words, soft and broken, yet heavy with meaning. He looked at the girl, her fragile body curled in the cold, her breath slow as she drifted into uneasy sleep. His eyes softened, and for a moment, the weight on his shoulders eased. In the middle of ruins, surrounded by death and silence, he had found something he thought he would never find again. Trust. The night had grown colder, darker, and heavier. The stars above the ruined city blinked like silent watchers. Distant and uncaring, the wind whispered through broken walls, stirring dust and ashes into the air. The alien girl slept curled against the stone, her breathing slow, her body thin and fragile. Beside her sat the human soldier, tired but awake, his eyes sharp, watching the shadows for movement. He was starving, his body weak, but his grip on the broken piece of wood never loosened. His mind refused to rest, because deep inside, He knew the peace would not last. He had seen too many nights like this, too many quiet hours that turned deadly in a heartbeat. Raiders did not care for silence. They hunted in it, they thrived in it, and something about the wind tonight felt wrong. He leaned forward, listening, his breath still, far off, beyond the ruins. Came a sound, light footsteps, but not alone, multiple, careful. Soft, as if trying not to be heard, but to a soldier, the silence between footsteps was louder than any scream. He stood slowly, gently placing his pack behind the girl, covering it with a piece of cloth. Then he knelt beside her, whispering low. "Wake up." The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open, still half dreaming. When she saw the fear in his eyes, she sat up quickly, her heart jumping in her chest. "Hide," he whispered, pointing toward a shattered wall with a deep crack. She did not ask questions. She crawled quickly into the gap, curling herself tightly, holding her breath. He looked at her one last time, then stepped away, walking toward the center of the ruined street. His legs were weak, his steps slow. But his body stood tall. He held the piece of broken wood in his hand like a weapon, though both he and it were falling apart. He listened again, and the footsteps were closer now. Then came a voice, low and cruel, echoing through the ruins like a snake's hiss. "Well, well, look what we found." From the shadows stepped three figures. Thin and fast, faces hidden by scraps of metal and cloth. Raiders, one carried a sharp blade. The second held a stun rod. The third simply cracked his knuckles, smiling. Without joy, they circled slowly, eyes scanning for loot, for weakness, for fear. The human stood still, saying nothing, his eyes locked on the one with the blade. "You don't look like much." One raider laughed. "Got anything useful in that bag?" The soldier didn't speak, his hands tightening around the wood. "Come." On another sneered, "Give us what you got, or we take it from your cold body." The third moved behind him, laughing, "And what's that?" Hiding in the shadows, a pet. The soldier turned fast. Swinging the broken wood at the speaker, the raider jumped back. But the strike had drawn a line in the dust. "No one touches her," the human said, his voice low and steady. His legs trembled, his arms ached, but he stood firm. The raiders were amused. At first, then they attacked, fast and cruel, blades flashing in the moonlight. The soldier blocked the first hit. Barely, the force shaking his bones, he struck back, hitting one raider's arm, sending him stumbling. But the second came from the side, hitting him in the ribs with the stun rod. The pain lit up his body, but he didn't fall. He turned and swung again, hitting the attacker's leg, causing him to scream. The third rushed in, tackling him to the ground, fists raining down. The soldier fought back, but he was outnumbered, his strength fading. The raiders laughed as they kicked him, calling him a fool, a broken dog. But then something unexpected happened. A small stone flew through the air and hit one raider's head. He turned sharply, confused. Another stone followed, then another. Small but fast. The girl had come out of hiding, her hands full of rubble, her face full of fire. "Leave him alone," she screamed, her voice shaking but loud. The raiders turned. Surprised by the fury in her eyes, the human lying on the ground used the moment to grab the stun rod and hit the nearest attacker. Sparks flew, a scream echoed, and chaos broke out again. The girl kept throwing stones, not stopping even when one hit her own foot. The soldier rose to his knees, blood on his face, but strength in his arms. Together, they fought, not with power, but with heart. The raiders, confused and frustrated, decided it wasn't worth it. "This isn't worth the scraps," one shouted. And they ran off into the night, leaving behind a broken man and a brave little girl. The street fell silent again, but the silence was different now. The soldier collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. The girl rushed to his side, her hands touching his bruised face. "You didn't have to fight for me," she whispered. "I didn't." He replied softly, "I chose to." She helped him sit, holding his hand. He had saved her, and she had saved him, two souls, once strangers, now bound by something more powerful than fear, trust, sacrifice, and the fire to protect each other. The stars above shined a little brighter that night, and in the dark, broken city, a small light had begun to rise. Not from fire, not from war, but from the quiet bravery of two hearts that refused to give up. The girl's hands were shaking as she pressed a cloth against the human's shoulder. Blood had soaked through his shirt, dripping slowly onto the broken stone. His face was pale, his breath sharp, and his eyes half open. But he was alive, alive because he had chosen to stand, to fight. Even when he had no strength left, the girl sat beside him, her own arms bruised, her knees scraped from crawling and throwing stones. She didn't feel pain, not yet. Her chest was still full of fire, the same fire that had made her shout, throw, scream. Even when she was terrified, for once, she had not been weak. She had not just watched, she had protected someone who had protected her. The human leaned his head back against the wall, blinking slowly. "You fought," he said softly, his voice rough. The girl nodded. Her lips pressed tight. "So did you." He gave the smallest smile, one corner of his mouth rising. "Couldn't let them take you." She lowered her gaze, her hands gripping the cloth tighter. "I won't let anyone hurt you either." Outside the ruin where they hid, the city was not quiet anymore. The fight had drawn attention. Distant footsteps echoed through alleys, whispers between hunters who had heard something strange. Not every raider ran when they lost. Some came back, some brought more. And some simply didn't like being embarrassed by a human and a starving alien girl. The human felt it in his bones. Danger was not finished with them yet. His pack was torn, the food gone, the flask nearly empty, and his Wapena broken stick was splintered. They could not stay there. If they waited, they would be surrounded, and this time, luck might not be on their side. He tried to stand, his muscles screaming in protest. The girl moved quickly, her shoulder under his arm, helping him balance. She was small, but her will was strong, step by step. They moved deeper into the ruins, slipping through narrow gaps, stepping over debris, avoiding open roads. They needed shelter, not just walls, but cover. The human remembered a place, an old building with thick stone walls, not far, half buried under wreckage, but untouched by fire. He pointed with his hand, and the girl nodded. Leading the way through a collapsed alley, the night air was sharp, the moonlight harsh, and every sound felt louder than it was. Behind them, another sound came, low voices. Fast footsteps, they were being followed. The girl's heart jumped. She looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. He nodded once, then pulled her gently forward. Faster, they moved as quickly as they could, his body nearly falling with every step, her hands grabbing his shirt to hold him steady. Just before the next corner, he stopped, listening. Shadows were moving behind them. Too close, too fast. They couldn't outrun them, not like this. He looked up and saw a collapsed stairwell. Its frame weak, but climbable. He pointed. Up. There, she helped him climb, pushing from behind, holding his foot, pulling his arm. Stone cracked under their weight, but they made it, one shaky floor above the street. From there, they could see down into the alley. 3 figures entered, weapons ready, eyes sharp. The girl held her breath, her small hand covering her mouth. The soldier crouched beside her, holding what remained of his stick like a blade. But the raiders didn't look up. Not yet. They searched the alley, their voices angry, confused. Where did they go? They were bleeding. They couldn't have gone far. Split up. Check every ruin. The girl leaned close to the human, whispering, "We have to move again." He nodded, but his body swayed. She reached out and grabbed his hand. "Come on, please." Step by step, they crossed the broken upper floor. Then down through a hole in the far corner. Their legs burned, their lungs hurt. But finally, they reached the old stone building. The human pushed open a rusted door, then collapsed inside. The girl pulled it shut and stacked broken furniture against it. Only then did she drop to her knees, panting, shaking. Her body finally realizing the danger was over. For now, inside, the building was cold. Dusty, but strong, stone walls blocked. The wind, thick ceiling beams still held above them. It was quiet. Safe for a little while, she crawled beside the soldier, who lay flat on his back, his eyes closed, lips parted as he tried to breathe. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He opened his eyes slowly. "I'm still here." Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not from fear, but from relief. He had fought. He had bled. He had stayed, and now he had survived one more time. She looked at his face, pale and worn, and knew that he had no reason to fight for her. But he had, again and again, outside. The city was not done with them. But for this moment, in this quiet place, they were alive, together, not alone, and ready to fight again. If they had to, because something had changed between them, not just trust, not just survival, but the quiet beginning of something stronger, loyalty. The first light of morning slipped through the cracks in the stone walls. It was soft and golden, touching the floor where dust floated in the air like tiny stars. The girl opened her eyes slowly, her body sore, her mind heavy from everything they had been through. She blinked, remembering the night, the fear, the running, the fight. Then her eyes moved toward the man lying beside her, and she felt something stir in her chest. The human was still there. Still breathing, though barely. His shirt was stained with blood, dried and dark, his face pale. Lips dry, but his chest rose and fell, slow but steady. The girl sat up carefully, reaching for the cloth she had used before. She dipped it in the last drops of water from the flask and wiped his forehead. His eyes opened, just a little, and when he saw her, a faint smile appeared. "You're still here," he whispered. She nodded quickly. "I told you I wouldn't leave." He tried to move, but groaned, his body refusing. "You should have," he said weakly. "I'm slowing you down." The girl shook her head. "You saved me, again and again." Her voice trembled. "You gave me food, water, protection." She looked down at his hand, still bruised from the fight. "You gave me hope when I had nothing." The man closed his eyes for a moment, as if her words gave him more strength than food ever could. He opened them again, his gaze calm but serious. "I don't know how long I can keep going," he admitted. His voice was low, honest, filled with quiet pain. "But if I fall, I want to know you'll keep walking." The girl felt her throat tighten, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't want to walk alone," she whispered. He reached for her hand, and she let him hold it, their fingers wrapping together. "You won't," he said. "Not anymore." They sat like that in silence, two souls broken by war, yet somehow still standing and outside. The ruined world began to wake under the morning sun. Birds that had once fled were returning, distant chirps mixing with the wind. Even the silence felt softer. Not dead, just waiting. Waiting for something to begin again. The girl stood up slowly, walking toward the door. She peeked through a small gap in the stone, watching the streets outside. It was quiet. The raiders were gone, at least for now. Smoke still rose from some places, but the sky above it was blue, clean, endless, full of possibilities. She returned to him, kneeling beside his side. "There's a river," she said softly, "far down the valley." He nodded slowly. "Water," she added, "maybe food too." He closed his eyes again, too far. She held his hand tighter. "I'll find something. I'll come back." He opened one eye and gave a tired smile. "You're brave." The girl shook her head. I'm not. You made me brave. She stood and looked around the room, gathering what little they had. The torn pack, the broken stick, the empty flask. A piece of cloth. Each item was useless alone, but in her hands they were enough. Enough to survive one more day. She looked at him, lying still but alive. Her heart ached to leave, even for a moment. But she knew she had to. If he stayed behind, he needed her to return. If he came with her, he might not survive the journey. This was her moment to protect him, the way he had protected her. She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. I'll be back, she whispered. I promise. He closed his eyes again, trusting her completely. Because sometimes, hope is not loud. It is not grand. Sometimes, it's a whisper in the ruins. A promise made by someone small but strong. She stepped out into the light, the wind cool on her face. Her body weak, her legs sore, her stomach empty, but her heart was full. Not of fear, not of sadness, but of something she had almost forgotten. Purpose. She walked through the broken streets, past burned houses, past shattered glass. With every step, the city seemed less like a graveyard and more like a place that could one day be rebuilt. She knew the way to the river. She had been there. Long ago, before the sky fell, before everything changed, now she would go again. Not as a lost child, but as a protector, as someone who had something to fight for. Behind her, in the safety of stone walls, the soldier rested, and as the sun rose higher, something else rose with it, a new beginning. Not built from weapons or power, but from a simple choice. One meal shared, one life saved, one promise made, and in a world full of silence, pain and darkness. That promise was enough to light the path forward, not just for her, but for both of them, because even in ruins, even after war, kindness still lived, and kindness had the power to change everything.